Hi, welcome to SPE Live. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Hopefully, you held on for us. I'm Paige McCowan. SPE Live is made possible in part by the SPE Foundation. Today, we're going to discuss the latest innovations and outlook in artificial lift. So, when talking about artificial lift, the key objective is to maximize recovery, and the challenge is to choose the appropriate equipment and technology over the lifetime of the well. But what are the gaps? What are the opportunities, innovations, and technology transfers available now that these unconventionals are mainstream? So, my guests today are Anthony Allison and Bill Hearn. Anthony is an artificial lift advisor for Occidental. He provides in house support for analysis, optimization, and troubleshooting of sucker rod pumped wells globally. Anthony currently serves as the chair of the 2020 SPE Artificial Lift Conference and Exhibition for the Americas and is a distinguished lecturer for 2020-2021. He holds a bachelor's in electronics engineering technology and master's in petroleum engineering, both from Texas A&M. Bill is the global production engineering chief with ConocoPhillips, with a subject matter expertise in gas lift, nodal analysis, optimization, and gas well deliquification. He is currently focusing on production engineering and assets across the globe. Bill has authored or co-authored more than 15 technical papers and holds 4 U.S. patents. He has a petroleum engineering technology degree for the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. Also, Bill and Anthony are very involved in the SPE Virtual Artificial Lift Conference and Exhibition starting next week. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's happy to be here.
Good. Also, I'd like to invite our audience to join in the conversation. This is your opportunity to ask the experts questions or voice your opinions or experiences with artificial lift. Add your questions and comments to the comments of the social media platform you're on. So let's get the conversation started. So obviously, artificial lift is not a new concept. It's been in use for many decades in conventional reservoirs. Now that unconventional reservoirs are mainstream or conventional, with respect to field development and many aspects of engineering, drilling, completion, production, what are some of the big challenges in unconventionals that make this technology transfer and innovation difficult? Just jump in.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a couple of ways to look at it. There's some difficulties, and then there's some real benefit to it too. But difficulties are, at least kind of from my perception today, is rapid production decline. Right, these wells change a lot in a very short period of time. Massive changes in water cut, massive changes in gas to liquid ratio. Throw in a little bit of sand just to make it interesting, and we've got kind of we have a wide set of challenges through our wide set of time, and so we wind up with gas to pump, some sand issues specifically on our systems where we're going to pump them, and then on the gas lift systems we really kind of get into flow path, how much injection horsepower we need and when, how much pressure do we need and when, and then we get a little bit of corrosion challenge. And on all those things, we have to really deploy a system that can reliably give us our production, but limit how many times we have to intervene in the wells, because that's just very, very connected to what our lifting costs look like. And that kind of makes it a really interesting and challenging problem.
If we look at kind of the area that I deal with the most, later on in the life of the well, when we move to rod pumping, you think not a lot has changed. I mean, rod pumping has been around for forever. It's one of the oldest lift methods that we have, and we're constantly stretching the boundaries of what we can do with that. We're always trying to move off of those higher rate methods to something like rod pumping for the tail end of that well's decline, so we can move those gas compression assets somewhere else, or we can get rid of an ESP that's struggling with the low flow rates that a well's producing. But by the same token, we've got very, very different well profiles that we're dealing with today, and a lot of the tools that we're using haven't changed a lot in a very long time. We're starting to see some new innovations with that. We're starting to see a lot, especially around gas handling and gas interference, how we manage those problems when we're trying to pump a well. I've heard some people describe it. It's like trying to pump foam or shaving cream in some places. And how do you deal with that on a system that's used to, really has served us well through years of water floods, and now we're trying to apply it to an entirely different set of challenges.
Right. So, talking about these challenges, so why are we seeing lower success rates in unconventional, particularly shale reservoirs with CO2, water flood, and artificial lift life cycle concepts? These are well known in the conventional reservoirs. So, why are we seeing a lower success in unconventional?
So I think for us, we've taken that history that, especially a lot of the folks I deal with, we take a lot of the history we have of CO2 water flood operations in conventional reservoirs, and tried to initially take those same practices and apply them to unconventionals, and in a lot of cases they just don't work as well. Something simple as, how many times do you cycle a rod pump well in a day? Well, on a conventional reservoir, that's fine to let that, keep that number low, 5-10 cycles in a day. And an unconventional, we may see 20-30 cycles in a rod pump, if you have it on pump off control. And I've really tried to advocate getting away from that, moving to variable speed drives so you can operate more continuously and deal with the slugging behavior that we get from the laterals. And the small diameter tubulars that we deal with. I have a lot more options in 7.5 and 7-inch casing than I do in 5.5, and that decisions we make early on to cut the cost of drilling and completing the well are challenges that we really struggle with for the life of it.
Yeah, I think our challenges are really similar. I think there's a part of it that's connected to the rock, right? We have a little bit of trouble kind of deploying, the standard EOR practices. We get a little bit that, the rock's tight, makes it a little bit challenging to kind of deploy and make that work for us. But then there's a bunch of it that's just around the methodology and the way that we lift a conventional asset, where we have some degree of predictability of how much liquid we're going to produce over a long period of time, and there's some relative consistencies there. We kind of get some gas consistencies. Now all of a sudden I'm trying to produce this really wide range of outcomes, all over a short period of time for a lot of changes that are going to occur. And oh, by the way, it's still got to last with the predictability that I would have had in a conventional application, when I'm scaling down from thousands of barrels per day all the way down to tens of barrels per day, over numerous years. But I really have to be able to still make that work and be able to keep that in a cost-effective method throughout that lifetime, so I can really keep my net cost of supply down. That's really interesting and different than what we would think of in a conventional asset, where we kind of have some degree of predictability. So that makes a big difference for us. So on top of the what type of EOR that we're able to deploy just due to the reservoir parameters, then couple that with the type of artificial lift things that we have to work on, it just becomes a very different animal. I think there's still some room in there for some type of EOR, but I think it's just going to look a little bit different than maybe the way it did before.
Right. So, keeping in mind that you're trying to maximize the reserve recovery and longevity, are these unconventional wells more aggressive environment, particularly when you're trying to save costs?
Yeah, I mean, there's pieces that are aggressive, right? You certainly got a sand component, you've got a corrosion component, you've got lots of velocity, so you've got erosional components that all come up. So they make that more challenging. But the key message is that reliability is still reliability and longevity is such a really key important thing to what contributes to ultimately your lifting cost, and therefore contributes to your cost of supply, that it's well worth the effort. That's a significant part of what we need to do if we really want to be able to make a lot of money out of this type of asset for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, we have solutions for corrosion. We have solutions for sand. But in dealing with these types of wells, the challenge is, how do I effectively deploy those and make them effective in these types of wells? If my chemical can't get down through a high fluid level that I'm carrying on a well to get to the pump, then it's not very effective in treating any of the components that I'm running downhole. So we have to start looking at other solutions like capillary strings for doing our chemical injection. Well, now you're adding cost to the system again, and it's the perpetual dilemma for a production engineer and artificial lift engineer of balancing the cost of those installations versus the life of the equipment that we get out of it. Can I sufficiently increase the life of my rods and my tubing by deploying something like that compared to that extra upfront cost on it? Or do we need to start looking at other solutions? Or at the end of the day, is it economical to live with those types of failure rates? And that is the constant challenge that we struggle with from asset to asset.
Yeah, just a constant adjustment, right? We're always have to rethink that. It seems like we have to rethink that daily, monthly, yearly. We're rethinking that all the time. What ultimately leads to the most effective way to produce a well?
Especially over the last 7 months, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
those decisions that we made in this time last year to March and April of this year changed completely. And even since then, as we've clawed back a little bit of price in oil, we're updating our economics on what we make decisions on very, very quickly.
I couldn't agree more.
So I was going to remind the audience to ask questions, but we do have a question from Greg Stevenson. He says, what do you think will be the key to developing the everlasting pump?
The everlasting pump.
That sounds like
a fairy tale.
It sounds like a very great question. Yeah. It's, we can design pumps that can deal with a lot of stuff today, really. I think a lot of it is more upstream of what's getting to the pump. So I think the key to making that pump life longer isn't necessarily some magical pump components we haven't discovered or designed, or metallurgies that haven't been applied yet. It's how do we get better with dealing with gas, and how do we get better with dealing with sand upstream of the pump, so we get it cleaner, more, and if anything, more consistent fluids to work with. We can design systems that handle some amount of gas, and we can design systems that handle some amount of sand. But when I get a big slug of nothing but gas for a long period of time, then we struggle. Or if I get a big, slug of sand that comes through and hits the system and sands the pump up, then it's a challenge. So if we can keep it more clean and consistent, and that's really the key, I think, to a lot of these unconventionals, is more consistent operation can lead to better operation and life of the equipment down the road.
All that, and all you got to do is just get it in a way that you can deploy it where you don't introduce a erosional or a mechanical challenge at the same time, right? If you can get all those pieces that are going to work on this side of the pump to be okay, and if I can just make it where the upper part of the system isn't going to be challenged by the mechanics, nothing to it, easy peasy.
Magical.
Sorry, I'm having my Ricky Bobby moment right now.
So, okay, we've got another question, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what innovation do you envision that would help maximize the longevity of artificial lift?
Yeah, for us, a lot of the innovations that are coming out right now, they do a lot for that. Can we get can the flow paths that we deploy our artificial lift system, can they be adequate to be able to deliver that wide range? Can we get additional horsepower where we need it to be able to deliver? I think those are really important. I think anything that optimizes the way that we handle what gets to the pump. I think really speaking to Anthony's point, what can we do to separate gas before it gets to the pump? What can we do to optimize that and keep solids out of the pump? I think they all have a big place in the advancements in that space are really going to be what makes a really significant difference to that longevity and then ultimately what we can do to make things work.
I mean, we're starting to, recognize and deal with some of these problems in new ways. Whenever, even in the last several years, we've seen more. To take one piece of our system, I've seen more new grades of sucker rods come out in the last several years than I have in the entire time that I've been in the industry, and probably more than even beyond whenever I got involved in oil and gas. So we're trying to deal with some of the corrosion issues, say with, okay, know that I'm going to have to live with it. How can I adjust the rest of the system to be able to better survive it, right? But the big innovation, I think, for the rod pump world is really if we can come up with a better way of dealing with the gas and 5.5 casing, that would be a game changer for us. That is one of the single largest issues that we struggle with on a daily basis.
Yeah, totally agree. That just kind of consistently comes up as root cause problem, right? At any kind of discussion, there's the gas to pump problems. What you can do to kind of limit your erosion and limit your corrosion, and can you get all those things to work?
So we've got a lot of questions coming in, so let's just tackle them if you guys are game. So how much are the chances of scale buildup associated with unconventional oil and gas wells?
Well, I'm not a chemist, but there's one down the hall from me, at least when I'm in my office. For us, it's something that we deal with. I think that's probably one of the areas that we have a much better understanding of where it occurs and how we deal with it. The monitoring practice that we have in place give us a good idea of our scaling tendencies for the particular well. We're pretty cautious about the types of water that we use during our workover jobs, or if we're doing, say, a flush job on a rod pump, and keeping an eye on those scaling tendencies over time, and coming in with a proactive scale squeeze to try and address that. So that's one of the areas I feel like we have a much better handle on.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I've kind of struggled with different things in the scale throughout conventionals, but I think we're actually doing pretty well with it on the unconventional side. The only part I still kind of struggle with a little bit is, do we have a clear knowledge of any scaling tendencies in the long laterals? I think there's still a little bit of a mystery on that, but I think once it gets to our production system, it seems like the scale is one of the places that we seem to be able to manage it pretty well. That at least that's kind of observation over a large subset of wells.
So I'll go back to my questions, and then we'll get back to the audience. So in unconventional operations, they seem to be kind of a factory operation, like cookie cutter, if you will. So what are some of the struggles between drilling, completions, production, and what do you foresee as some solutions to that?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it earlier. 5.5 casing is the biggest thing that causes us problems down the road. It just really limits the size and the gas handling capability of any of the equipment that we'd want to put in the ground. Or even if I want to, say, just live with the inefficiency of pumping a lot of gas, then it limits the size of the pump that I can put in the ground to try and deal with it. Getting to slim hole, I'm going to talk outside my comfort zone, but getting to slim hole ESPs and things like that to try and move the higher rates has certainly become a challenge. One of the interesting innovations in that has been with the permanent magnet motors and what's happening there to improve the reliability of that piece of the system. But if we just had larger casing, even if it was just in the vertical, would do a world of difference in how we can handle our designs. Having that conversation with your drilling and completion people up front, right? Well spacing is getting tighter. We're having to do more steering to be able to get laterals on target. Understanding where that steering happens and how drastic it is. There's an entire SPE technical section built around wellbore positioning, right? And they have lots of, and we've been fortunate to our drilling folks invite our production folks to take part in that, to give our feedback on, okay, if you make this kickoff at 500 feet versus 1,000 feet from surface, what impact does that have on the life of an ESP, or the ability to get an ESP to ground, or the life of a rod pump system?
Yeah, I'd take it one step further. Is really it's your drilling and completion components. What's the shape of the well, what's that stimulation have to look like, and what's going to be the most feasible way to kind of deploy that. But then really coupling that back up with my reservoir folks and my facility folks that all need to really kind of get their minds around, hey, what is this well going to look like? What ideally does it look like from an economic standpoint? What do I have to be able to produce out of it? And what things do I have to consider when I'm going to be able to actually drill and complete it? So I've got a good chance of actually meeting those expectations. Um, we a lot of times we kind of come back and we go, we hustle and bustle to try to get a design deployed that can deliver the optimal rate out of that well, and it's from the productivity standpoint, just to kind of come back and say, well, we don't really have the facilities to be able to produce that back. Or sometimes we look at we are limited by flow path. Just kind of to Anthony's point, we say, hey, this well could produce like that, but there's just not enough flow area or area for me to work in to be able to give you a pump to deliver that. So I think it's a big opportunity in that multi-functional discussion to really start to be able to understand that.
Okay, we have another audience question. This is probably towards you, Anthony. Henning Hansen asked, are crooked wells and high deviation well bores still a challenge for rod pumps? And if not, how was it solved?
They are certainly still a challenge for us. I think we're doing better today with the newer wells that we drill and giving us smoother well bores to deal with. But we still have a lot of existing inventory that we have to pump, and we have to have ways to deal with it. Rod guides have been around for forever. You're starting to see new materials come out that are hopefully improving the life of those guides that we use to deal with that rod and tubing wear. Another area is line tubing. We run a lot of that in very severe cases. Challenge there is, if I put a tubing liner in, now I reduce the ID of my pipe, and now I reduce the size of the pump that I can put in the well. So sometimes that may have an impact on how much production you can move from the well. And I am always an advocate of long, slower strokes on wells like this. Reduce those reversals, reduce the cycles, and the amount of wear that you're putting on the rod and tubing through applications like that, I think, go a long way.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we've got a question from Corey Wood. What have you seen as the most successful late life artificial lift solutions for deeper unconventional wells, and where it may be like too deep for rod lift?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say we're on the cusp of really starting to figure that out, because we're getting to that late life finally in some of these. We've done pretty well doing kind of optimized gas lift intermitting. We've done pretty well introducing a plunger to really kind of keep the lifting, the amount of lift gas down to a minimal, and really getting it back to economics. So that seems to go pretty well. The complicated part with the plunger lift part has been introducing it in conjunction with a well that may have had side pocket mandrels in the first place. So you kind of have to think through and plan to either be able to deal with the side pocket mandrel or be able to deploy after you've done a workover. I think there's a lot of good energy around just being able to do really good, effective intermitting. I think there's lots of opportunities in that. We're seeing some really good tools that are allowing us to be able to do that, and there's no real depth limit on being able to use those technologies. So we've been doing pretty well with that so far.
So we've got another question. We got many, many questions, which is great.
Good, excellent.
So from Kathy Sun, talking about gas lift, what opportunities do we have to further improve gas lift, and what are current innovation trends in this space?
Yeah, I'm going to let Anthony answer that, because he was waiting for this. No, I'm just kidding.
I was about to go running out of the room crying.
So to me, the biggest innovations that I think are going to do a lot for us in that space kind of get into a few different things. One is is matching adequate compression horsepower, surface pressure to be able to inject and match the depth that you need to at the time that you need it. So some people are doing some different degrees of high pressure gas lift, even in shortened periods. There's some excitement around that. I think the opportunity to really optimize and get to single point injection, whether that's through surface controlled or just innovative ways that you do your gas lift design, I like both of those things. There seems like there's a lot of opportunity there, and it's a pretty exciting piece of it. And then I think we're kind of on the cusp of some interesting stuff of can we assist our gas lift system with the use of some chemicals. We're doing some things where we're testing surfactants in conjunction with gas lift, doing some different things like that. I think those all have some potential to really help us really kind of build out where we would do or where and how we do our gas lift work. So I think there's some real good innovations there. It's kind of surprising. A lot of those technologies have still continued to advance, even in a time that's kind of challenging for the industry as a whole. It still seems like there's some progress there. It's one of the things I really get excited about, in these kind of discussions, and when as we progress to the conference. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to discuss what's being tested and what other people are doing in that space, because I think there's a lot of us testing and doing things out there to truly optimize and get further in that space. But I think has to be spread out amongst a bunch of different production companies right now, because we all don't have unlimited budgets to go ahead and explore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just to put a quick plug in for the conference coming up, the Artificial Lift Conference and Exhibition that starts virtually, that starts next week on the 10th. Later, we'll show you some links that you can still register. Let's take a few more audience questions. They seem to be fast and furious.
Right.
So let's see, Willie Manfubi, hopefully that's right. With deeper, longer, hotter, gassier, sandier, and smaller wells, should we rely only RD for new technologies, or make a case to management for bigger casing? Would that be better?
Bigger casing is always better, right? It comes down to the full life cycle economics of the wells, right? Yes, going to smaller casing while we're drilling has an impact on our capital cost up front. Bill kind of alluded to this. It also has an impact on how effectively you can pump your completions, right? Smaller casing, greater frictional losses. I need more horsepower to pump my frac job to get through that. So there is a case to be made there to management to say, if you give us more options, if you give us larger pipe, then we can make these wells more profitable for the long term. Everyone has that horror story of the $1 million fishing job, right? And even just getting broken stuff out of the ground becomes a whole lot easier with larger pipe to go with it.
Yeah, I guess I'd offer up. It's time you're really going to have that discussion on kind of an asset by asset base. We're seeing so much difference between this bundle of things we're calling unconventionals, but we're seeing so much difference from asset to asset. I don't think it's one answer. I really don't. I think you really have to be able to sit down as a team and see what are the things that move the needle from a cost of supply perspective, and decide which ones will do the best for you. And I think in some cases it's going to be bigger. It's going to be bigger casing, and I think in other places it's going to be, you just got to be able to optimize the system to be able to operate as effectively as possible within the smaller casing. And I can think of one asset in each of ours that fits into that category. One is absolutely, we need bigger casing because we're always going to be constrained. The other one's like, if it saves you that much money in the drilling and completion to be able to deploy in smaller casing, I can make it go in what I've got. So I think it's really a big discussion about what that means to your asset.
Yeah, and so that's the other balance for us, I think. Paige, you mentioned earlier this factory model that a lot of us have gotten into of trying to take in order to cut costs, of taking a common design and trying to apply it as broadly as possible. And if we can find ways to try to stick to the standard as much as possible, but as we start to learn more about these wells in different areas, where can we tweak that on a well by well basis and get something that's more appropriate for that particular well, kind of like Bill mentioned.
So we have another question. It goes back to gas lift. It's from anonymous LinkedIn user.
Oh, that's bad.
Might be your mom. You never know.
I was going to say that was awfully nice of her to write in.
Can you speak to your experience with wins, losses, combining plungers with gas lift?
Yeah, I wish that I could give you a long run of all of this ton of experience that we've got. We frankly just started to really do it and deploy it. We're over the last couple of years here. So far, if I kind of wanted to list the major wins, they're connected to injection gas. That's the primary. We're taking gas utilizations and we're reducing them dramatically when we add a plunger, and we think of the gas as a cost. It's part of your lifting cost. It's got a certain amount of cost per MCF that you inject. So if you can reduce it from hundreds of MCF down to 50 MCF, the value in that is very significant. So we're kind of on the border of realizing how much that's going to influence thousands of wells as compared to the 50s and the hundreds that we really had that were kind of somewhat pilots for us really getting to realize that. So for me, that's probably going to be where the big win is by the addition of the plunger. I have to confess that the result with paraffin has been also really significant, a little bit more than I expected. Certain parts of our fields have significant paraffin, and if you can keep that paraffin moving, it's a lot easier to deal with it at surface. So we've got a little bit of wins on both, but I think that the primary today is really going to be, what does my injection gas go to when I'm able to deploy a plunger effectively and put it in conjunction with gas lift? That seems to be the big win.
Okay, great. And that wasn't your mother. That was Ben Nathan that asked that question. So thank you, Ben. So
her question is coming still, I promise.
Do you love your mother? No, sorry. So I do want to get to this topic about, obviously, the global pandemic and activity slump in oil and gas has hit the oil field services and equipment suppliers very hard. So many companies have exited unconventionals and others have closed altogether. What are some of the changes in technology and equipment supply, and where are some of the gaps that we could fill to get through this?
Yeah, so you're starting to see it with certainly a lot of the supplier side, right? And it started more on some of the completions and pressure pumping sides of the industry. We're starting to see more of it on the artificial lift space as well. You look at some of the recently announced stuff with Lufkin and Schlumberger, for example, and we're getting to a point where we're dealing with we have fewer different vendors to call on to supply our needs. That creates some challenges in places where we were already limited on the varieties of equipment or just competition in the marketplace in general. I hope that by combining some of those assets that we'll start to see some more innovations in areas that we're struggling, right? Obviously, R&D budgets are taking a big hit right now, and we still need to keep developing and keep pushing this technology farther and farther. To the plungers with gas lift question, part of their benefit is reducing their lift gas requirements. Well, that's one of the same reasons that we try to push rod pumps earlier in the life of a well, is so I can take that lift gas and deploy it to other wells that it makes more sense, that it gets us more oil. But when we struggle to push rod pump into those applications where the GLRs are very high, and so we we still need a lot of innovation, and we still need a lot of drive in the industry to come up with new tools and new solutions for pushing this.
Yeah, I confess I was anxious about how the suppliers were going to kind of live through not just the COVID but the overall downturn. That always makes me anxious. Both Anthony and I come from a supplier background in our lives at some point, so we certainly understand. But at the same point, we really realize that once investment kind of goes away, sometimes the innovations and stuff go away. I've been pleasantly surprised. I think a lot of them, a lot of the vendors, some have made the decision, oh, exit, I'm out. That's unfortunate. Some of them have taken this opportunity to sit back and really think about the way that they do their business, and have taken that opportunity to improve. So I've seen kind of a return to some more service side mentality, which we'd got to a point where we were just hammering out volumes and cost, and it had probably become a little difficult for a service provider to sit down and have a conversation with you anymore and really talk through the technical piece of it. I'm starting to see a little bit of that start to return, which is really exciting. I'm hopeful for that, because I think that's where a lot of that innovation comes back to life. And I'm hopeful that this is going to be an opportunity for a lot of our suppliers to really kind of go back and refocus on their artificial lift business, where they maybe were companies that had been purchased or had consolidated into a wide range of services, and that made it kind of difficult and to attract capital to be able to deploy and spend it specifically on the things that I kind of hold near and dear to my heart in the artificial lift space. Some of them now are kind of, to me, going back to their core of their artificial lift as part of their business strategy, and I'm enthused. I hope that's going to be really the observation we get. I don't know if it's going to be the case or not, but I've got high hopes. There's going to be some really good things that come out of it as well.
Yeah, I think we all do. I think it's time to look at some of that. And talking about the downturn, there's been a lot of M&A activity among operating companies in unconventional space. I think you've both seen this as well. So, how have you experienced consolidation and best practices with artificial lift selection, engineering, and operation? And how can we be successful during this time of change?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've been involved in a couple of recent acquisitions. The first one was one where the strategies were pretty well aligned. So it was a relatively easy thing to kind of get into we didn't have to do much on the strategy side, maybe a little bit different on the optimization and deployment side. The next big one that's coming up, there's going to be some places where there's a difference in philosophy, I imagine, but I think the philosophy part is one thing, but really just this benefit of the expertise from kind of two different approaches. If we can combine those and really get to a kind of a promising go forward plan, I think there's real opportunity in that, because I tend to see when people are looking for good opportunities for an acquisition, they're looking for something that fits well into their portfolio, but maybe there's something that company they're acquiring does better. Maybe they've got a better land position. Maybe that company's has done a better job at just their lifting cost. Whatever it is, if those two pieces fit really well together, we may actually get to see some 1+1 is 2s instead of 1+1 is 1.5 or 1.25. And that's what I'm kind of hoping for, because I think there's real opportunity for that, and it's part of the reason that I'm really looking forward to the conversations that we have at the conferences, because so many of the people that we are going to meet and talk with at those opportunities, they've gone through one now. They're probably further into it than our company is. Anthony's company's done more. Chevron, everybody's a little further into one than we are. So we're excited to have those conversations with them and say, hey, how are things going, and where are their challenges?
Yeah, I think when you come into a situation like that, both sides, especially companies that have been around for a long time, over time, you have your own internal SMEs, and you have your own best practices that you've developed over your experiences over a long period of time. And so there can be a tendency to, think, well, we think we're pretty good at what we're doing, and so that's the way that we should be doing things. And when you get, two groups together like that, if the right chemistry and the right openness is there on both sides, it's a really unique opportunity to say, oh, well, y'all are doing something in these wells that I never thought of or had seen somewhere, and didn't think it really fit for the way that we did things, but the way y'all have shown success in it, we've I really had my eyes opened in some of the discussions that we've had in the past year or so, working with some of the new engineers that have come into the company, and understanding how they've operated their wells, and then have been able to provide some of our own learning. So it's a challenge. It's certainly not easy, right? But it is a unique opportunity, and I really encourage anybody who's going through the same thing, be very open. To steal my favorite Ted Lasso quote, be curious, not judgmental, as you get to know one another in these things.
Definitely well said. That's it, right? It's going to have to be what's the way that we can best get the out of both of what we were good at going into this thing. And I think that's absolutely spot on. You don't know everything. They don't know everything. Everybody together hopefully can really have open eyes to pick out what's the best of what we both are pretty good at.
Yeah, that's really a motto for the industry too, right? That's how we make innovations happen. So
Yep.
we still have a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we can't get to them all. But as I mentioned, you're both involved with the upcoming SPE Virtual Artificial Lift Conference and Exhibition. So what are you looking forward to? What are some of the highlights, and that our audience can join in and maybe get some more questions answered at the conference?
So I think the thing I'm always looking for from events like this is, where are other people stretching the boundaries of what we're doing with our technology today? There's always, and that may either be from a unique or new perspective or new application of existing tools and technology, just in a slightly different way that we haven't thought of before, or maybe it's something entirely new, a new, the latest and greatest new widget that comes along that changes our life. I think there's good places for both of those discussions. And one of the themes that we're bringing up, and Bill can speak to the plenary session that he's chairing as we open the event, is how do we strive to make our unconventional wells more of our conventional way of life, right? For a lot of us, the unconventionals our future. It is where a lot of our production and our growth opportunities come from. And so how can we make those, not the factory model so much, but how can we make it so that it is just regular everyday part of life, and get to where they become more boring operations instead of an excitement and challenge every time we bring a new well on.
Yeah, that's it. One of the things I always look forward to in these conferences is really that chance to work and discuss with people that are in peer companies and our vendors and suppliers. There's such a great opportunity, and with this kind of pandemic time, we've had challenges in being able to do the things we normally do. We don't get as many opportunities to get those discussions going, and this is going to be a very, very fun opportunity to do that. I had the uphill challenge of being able to try to come behind what I thought was one of the more successful parts of the last conference, which was a plenary session that Anthony had done at the beginning of our last conference. And we just got so much insight from having people that were going through different things and different challenges in their own assets. So we put together what I think is a star-studded plenary session. We've got Johannes Visser from Chevron, Tom Walker from Oxy, which will be strong PE, big company look and really what things they've had to do in both the M&A space, but even just the overall optimization in tough times type situation. We've got some real pure artificial lift expertise, and Leslie Malone joining us. And then we've got we took an opportunity to get one of our vendor partners to come on. Darcy O'Howe will be speaking. I think it marries up to be a really good conversation. It's going to be like this, where you're doing it all through the technologies, which hopefully we can pull off a little smoother than I started this one with. But frankly, I think it's really exciting. I'm looking forward to that conversation because I just tend to learn so much from listening to people that have their set of challenges, and I'm really looking forward to a discussion about technologies, both digitally and mechanically. Uh, Data analytics is obviously going to be a fairly significant amount of conversation, and then really challenges and successes and what everybody's doing to compete and be able to produce effectively in these difficult times.
Exactly. Like you said, Bill, it will be virtual, but if you join us live virtually, you will be able to have chat rooms and discuss different topics with the authors and others attending the conference. But you can also access it on demand. There's still be network opportunities. There'll be exhibitor presentations. So it'll just be the full conference on your screen. So hopefully people can join in. And for a full list of the technical program, we've included a link in the description at in the chat of this broadcast. You'll see that going across the screen. And also, we'll add a link to the registration. So if you're interested in attending and you haven't registered already, there's still plenty of time to do that. And you get to see more of Anthony and Bill. So thank you, Anthony and Bill, for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to do it. Thank you very much for having us, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all live at some point, but I'm also looking forward to the virtual next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Really enjoyed the discussion today and all the great questions that came in from the audience. And I look forward to seeing that same enthusiasm with our sessions and our presentations that we have next week.
Yep, we can continue the chat then. We also want to say thank you to the SPE Foundation for their support of SPE Live, and we'll see you next week at the Artificial Lift Conference and Exhibition starting on November 10th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.